Good morning and welcome to today's event. A reminder to media on the line, please press *1 to enter the queue. You will be limited to one question and one follow-up. With that, I will hand it over to Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General, Mike Farnworth.
Good morning. I'm Mike Farnworth, BC's Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General, and I'd like to thank you for joining me here today. And I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. Stopping violence, supporting safety and creating security are central to our work as government. That's why I'm pleased to announce that we are providing $22 million over the next 3 years to support survivors of sexual assault and gender-based violence. We're investing in services people need by providing stable annual funding for sexual assault services for the first time in 20 years. This new funding will allow service providers to focus on providing the care people need when they need it. We understand that the safety and well-being of our citizens depends on us helping to stop gender-based and sexualized violence. And it's essential that people who have experienced sexual violence can immediately access medical services, counseling, and support. Beginning in 2023, more than $10 million will be provided each year for direct funding for community-based sexual assault services. This new funding builds on the more than $42 million already provided annually to support over 400 victims' service and violence against women services across British Columbia. Service providers have been able to apply for one-time only funding through programs such as the Emergency Sexual Assault Services Grant Program. However, this annual funding will better support the work that they do to help survivors. In the coming months, work will be done to develop a process for funding these services. And now I'd like to turn it over to Grace Lohr, our Parliamentary Secretary for Gender Equity, who is a passionate advocate for both survivors and service providers.
Thank you very much, Minister. My name is Grace Lohr, and I'm BC's Parliamentary Secretary for Gender Equity. I am incredibly grateful for the chance to be here today and to be part of this announcement. Like so many others, I have worked on the front lines of anti-violence work, and I have seen the devastation and long-term effects of sexualized violence when survivors are not able to access services that are trauma-informed and survivor-centered when and where they need it. And too many people in our province still do not feel safe. People continue to face violence and to feel at risk and targeted in their community. Most of these people are women, Indigenous women, immigrants and newcomers, those who are racialized, trans people, and others in the 2S LGBTQ+ community, as well as those with disabilities, are especially targeted for violence. Sexual assaults and sexualized violence happen in every kind of community, urban, rural. It happens at work, at school, and in the home. And that is why we need to make sure that services are available. I was so proud to be part of our previous announcements that provided a total of $20 million to assist community-based sexual assault response throughout the province. These services are essential. They ensure access to basic care like medical care, emotional and crisis support, safety planning, and options for accessing justice. These services are survivor-centered, they're trauma-informed, and they're culturally aware. And we know that service providers and community organizations that deliver this care need stable funding. And that is why we're here today. I'd like to take the opportunity to share an example from a service provider in Port Alberni. Over a 4-month period last year, when a sexual assault response team was established, 15 survivors, all of them women between the ages of 17 and 56, were accompanied to the hospital and received care and personal support. This is more trips to the hospital for forensics exams than in the entire previous year. Not because there was more violence, but because more survivors sought help once supports to do so were available. All but 4 of these women were Indigenous. Only 3 had a friend or family member present. And this means that if someone from this team had not been there, the survivor would have navigated care and undergone a forensic exam alone and unsupported after being traumatized and subjected to violence. Out of the 15 women, 5 needed a safe ride home but had no money for a cab or bus, so the team members assisted. 6 needed to submit their clothing for forensic examination, and the team was able to provide new underwear, socks, t-shirts, and leggings. Had these services not been available, the women would have left the hospital in hospital clothes only. Services like this deserve predictable and dedicated funding. They cannot, as they have been forced to do, rely on unpredictable and insufficient grants. Tomorrow, we will start our engagement discussions that we announced late last year. Discussions with experts and community that will develop a gender-based violence action plan and ensure that survivors can access the care they need. We have a lot of work ahead of us, good work that will make a difference in the lives of British Columbians. And while this is a huge step forward, we know there are still gaps. There's work to do. We've heard from survivors, from service providers, from other stakeholders, and we know that we can't do this alone, but we can together. I'm really pleased now to introduce Ninu Kang from the Ending Violence Association of BC.
Thank you, Parliamentary Secretary Lohr. Sexual assault is considered the most underreported violent crime in Canada. While other crimes are on a decline, sexual assault is on the rise. Early intervention, along with emotional and practical support for survivors, can get them on their path to healing. Provincial emergency sexual assault funding was cut 20 years ago, as the minister indicated. And EVA BC, along with many others, advocated for over 18 years, working with the provincial government to return these essential fundings for sexual assault survivors. As P.S. Lohr said, in 2020, we were pleased to hear the announcement of a provincial grant program to breathe new life into community emergency sexual assault programs. EVA BC continues to administer these funds and saw organizations from across BC enhance existing programs and or develop new ones to ensure that sexual assault survivors get the support they need. Some of those funds were earmarked and directed to Indigenous organizations to create programs with culturally safe responses. This announcement of $22 million to support those who have experienced sexual violence is a message to all survivors that they are not forgotten. We are thrilled that our provincial government has committed to ensuring that services for sexual assault survivors are critical and need to be part of the overall response to gender-based violence. I'd like to turn it over to Elijah to speak on what this means to our frontline services.
Thank you, Ninu. Very good to be here with you, Minister Farnworth and Secretary Lohr. I'm Elijah Zimmerman, the Executive Director at the Victoria Sexual Assault Center. I'm going to take a few moments to share how this money helps survivors with a look at the services we provide. VSAC is an urban center on Lekwungen territory, and we're fortunate to have a best practice, the only kind in Canada, 24/7, 365 clinic with a sexual assault response team, or as we call it, SART. Our clinic is for anyone of any gender, 13 and up. What this means is a survivor reaches out after assault, either calling our access line or the Vancouver Island crisis line, and a SART team member then supports them as they attend an exam in hospital, or often they attend our clinic where a forensic nurse examiner will care for them in a trauma-informed design space that is comfortable and for support and care. Recently had a survivor share with us. He was so nervous. He wasn't sure how it would feel to come to this kind of clinic, but it made a huge difference that he felt seen and supported and cared for in such a difficult moment. Survivors can also choose after using our clinic to see a crisis counselor for 10 to 12 sessions. We also have victim service workers that can help survivors make police reports or go through the court process if that's what they choose to do. All of what I've just shared here is a glimpse at the many steps or options that survivors have, and it can be overwhelming. And that's why it's so important that we have wraparound care, that we can walk with survivors each step of the way. Having this kind of core and stable funding means survivors can count on this best practice now and in the future. Imagine, or for some of you, you already know, the feeling of experiencing sexualized violence and knowing there are services available to help you in what might be the most difficult time of your life. Knowing that support extends beyond the acute moment into a process over time. Knowing you are not alone. The contrast of not having this is stark and still a reality for too many people. We know early support exponentially helps a healing trajectory. This is good for the person, their families, and our communities, so they can heal and live a life of dignity, respect, and health. Here at VSAC, we support current and historical survivors, and we've seen that need grow in the pandemic. More complex needs related to sexualized violence, more survivors coming forward and fully engaging our services. This step of core, stable funding begins to recognize the depth and breadth of need we have for these services across BC. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now take questions from the media. A reminder to reporters on the line, please press *1 to enter the queue. You will be limited to one question and one follow-up. Our first question today comes from Mira Baines, CBC.
Sure. This question is for Ninu Kang. Hi, Ninu. And I'm wondering about the pandemic and sort of the effects on the increased rates of sexual assault. Can you just talk a little bit about that and, how the money will help with core funding?
Thanks, Mira. Good to hear your voice. One thing we've been hearing when we're reaching out to our member programs, and what they're sharing with us on the front line is that they have had increased rate of clients coming through their doors. And I think Elijah will confirm that. We've got an increased number of gender-based violence. That includes everything from intimate partner violence to sexual violence to stalking and other forms of violence. So we're hearing that in general from services from across the province, but in particular with sexual assault services, we know that there's also an increase in this type of crime. And as Elijah pointed out, what's really important is the immediate response that a community has to someone that's experienced sexual violence. And we do know that there's a disproportionate rate of sexual violence against particular groups of women, whether they're Indigenous women. We also know immigrant women. We've also heard that international students in the universities and colleges are experiencing disproportionate levels of sexual violence. So it's really important for sexual survivors to know that there's something in the community that is easy access. And it's not necessarily that they're going to use police as their first intervention, supports that are trauma-informed, where the survivors are believed, where services are culturally, perhaps linguistically appropriate. Even if the particular service doesn't have the type of supports that individual needs, that organization knows who else to make appropriate referrals to. Those are all things that this money that has gone into communities from across the province, these are the services that have been able to increase infrastructure and work along with other services in their communities to enhance the response to sexual assault survivors. Thank you.
Mira, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I do. And this question is for Minister Farnworth, and it's on a different topic. Minister Farnworth, there are questions over another convoy that one of the organizers of the Ottawa protest, they say they're heading for Victoria later this month. Are you concerned about that? And what, if any, preps are being made to prevent what happened in Ottawa happening in Victoria?
What I can tell you is that we do monitor whenever we hear of these kinds of things taking place around these so-called convoys. That being said, we have seen the legitimate, peaceful demonstrations that have taken place here in Victoria, and the police have done, I think, an incredible job in terms of handling the situation, and I expect that that's exactly what they will continue to do.
Next question comes from Binder Sajan, CTV.
Hi there. Yeah, just wondering if, Ninu, perhaps you can talk to us a little bit about what the impact has been on organizations like yours to not have this core funding over the past 20 years. As I understand, you have to apply for grants. Is there uncertainty? Has there been stoppages in the services that you've been able to provide? If you can just talk a little bit about that impact and whether you believe that there's any benefit in the future in having services like these come under a specific ministry.
So nearly 20 years ago, when these sexual assault fundings were cut, many organizations had to close their doors. Many programs were shut down. Few organizations from across our province continued to provide supports to sexual assault survivors. And many times they had to tap into funds that they raised from the community. They had to apply for grants and short grants from other ministries to cobble together various fundings just to make sure that they weren't turning away survivors of sexual assault. And I think Victoria Sexual Assault Centre is a really good example of that. And there are many others I could name. But we do know that across our province, particularly in rural communities, there were organizations and programs shut down. And so what EVA BC has been advocating for, it's a provincial organization that supports close to 300 frontline programs. What we've been doing is working really closely with the provincial government, pulling other stakeholders in the community together and working alongside of them and saying that part of gender-based violence response in a province is to focus on sexual assault support services. As a province, we've done a good job, relatively good job in providing supports to intimate partner violence responses. But what we need is a sexual assault policy in our province that's going to help us triage what we need across the province with regards to training frontline workers to respond to sexual support. We need consistent funding in these programs so that programs aren't having to figure out where their next year's funding is going to come from. We also need to be able to pull communities together to look at the various services that are in place, not just the frontline emergency sexual response, but what happens to survivors for their long-term trauma recovery phase. So when you ask what have we been advocating for, we've been advocating for consistent ongoing funding. So we're thrilled about this announcement. We're looking for ongoing supports to these programs so that they can continue to provide the best services possible. We also want to continue to advocate for a sexual assault policy in our province, so that we can pull together provincial stakeholders from various ministries. And frankly, where this money lands, I'm less concerned with that. I'm more interested in the champions from within our provincial governments who are going to continue to insist that we need to have equitable funding across our province for sexual assault services.
Binder, do you have a follow-up?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you very much. We move on to Lisa Yusta, City News.
Hi, I apologize. It's about a different topic. Someone else is covering this story for our station. Minister Farnworth, I'm just wondering if you can talk about Alberta is going the step of pausing their provincial fuel sales tax. People are very concerned about how they are going to live with prices expected to hit about $2.50 midweek. For the affordability government, what are you going to do with gas prices to make this at least less unaffordable at this point in this very dire situation?
Thank you for the question. The reality is the gas price situation is driven by events outside of provincial control. The situation invasion of Ukraine have dramatically upset the energy markets, not just here in British Columbia, but in fact right around the world. At the same time, in terms of affordability, we have taken a number of initiatives on affordability in general to make life more affordable, whether it is around providing significant savings in terms of childcare in this province, moving towards $10 a day childcare, whether it has been the changes that have come about in ICBC insurance that have seen people's insurance drop on average of $491 a year, along with the rebates that we were able to offer. At the same time, recognizing that that if there are other initiatives that could be taken, obviously we would we'll try and look at that. But there's no simple solution to the situation of rising fuel prices.
Lisa, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I know it's not simple, but Alberta is making the move to remove their provincial taxes, or pause, I should say, pause them. Could BC not pause them at this point in time when gas arguably is completely unaffordable?
The only planned increase is the 1 cent a litre on April 1st. And one of the challenges on that taxation side, as a number of economists and fuel experts have indicated, down and that the fuel companies don't just jack the price up to take advantage of the margin that you may have created. The reality is that there is significant instability in the energy markets on a global basis, directly related to the invasion of Ukraine by Russia.
We have time for one more question today. We'll go to Shannon Waters, BC Today.
Hi there. I wanted to ask about the timeline for this funding. A couple of questions on that front. Minister Farnworth, I believe it was you who said that the way that this funding is going to be rolled out will be developed over the coming months. So I'm curious what the timeline is for actually delivering these dollars to, I believe it's the 50 centres around the province that will be benefiting from them. And also if you have a breakdown of what the funding is going to be year by year.
So the funding is stable funding. It is $10 million annually. The next step is the development of the procurement process. We would like that to be done as expeditiously as possible. The new funding starts on April 1st of 2023. In the meantime, the existing grant-based funding remains in effect, and so organizations can count on that funding, knowing full well that on April 1st, 2023, it moves to stable ongoing funding that they don't have to worry about either getting through a grant procurement basis. And that's on top of the $42 million that's annually already provided for programs dealing with violence against women and gender violence in general.
Shannon, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, please. This would be either, I think, for Ninu or Elijah. One of you said that this funding and the fact that it's stable and permanent will begin to address the need. And I'm wondering if for either of you anticipate that this funding promise is going to be enough to meet the needs for the programs that you are delivering.
Elijah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can speak to that. This funding enables us to have a bit of confidence towards all the programming and services we offer, but we will still continue to need to look for donations and fundraising and other grant programs. So this is a great first step. Definitely a restoration after 20 years. I think that's a great thing to be doing. But the need and the awareness of supports and services needed, it's quite large here in our province and really around the world. So I think we do need to keep working towards meeting those needs.
Thank you, Vince and attendees. That concludes today's event.